In Fallout 3, you can find many oversized and undersized items and objects which have been scaled up or down compared to their usual size. Some of them are useful, but more often than not, they only serve as decoration, and some of them can't be collected without console commands. Also, these items do behave a little differently. You can still pick them up and drop them again, but you can only do it a single time without their unusual size changing back to normal. However, there is something you can do to prevent this from happening, and that's simply shooting the item before picking it up. I'm not sure why this works, but I can confirm it does.
Why won't you die?
Starting with the base game, the first items of unusual size I'd like to mention can be found in the county sewer mainline. On the shelf next to Gallo the Ghoul, there's 2 undersized Nuka-Cola trucks. On the floor is a tiny cage with 2 small rad roaches, and in the kitchen is an undersized safe, although the size of the lock is still average. Near DuPont Circle, inside the dry sewer, is a sad scene with a few scaled down objects. Here we can see the remains of a mother and child who tried surviving the Great War by fleeing into the sewers. While they did manage to escape the fire, the radiation, dehydration, or other survivors got them in the end. Now, 200 years later, all that's left is an adult skeleton, an undersized baby carriage, and an undersized skeleton. At Evergreen Mills inside the southern shack is an oversized pair of scissors. There's a lot of these in the game, and I'm not going to mention them all because that would be rather boring, so let's just say they represent shears and move on to the more interesting things. At the F. Scott Key Trailing Campground, near the Scenic Overlook sign, is the smallest skeleton in the game. It's strange seeing a child camping with their parents, considering children were either in school or on field trips when the bombs dropped, though it is possible the parents survived, collected their child, and went camping to escape the chaos. Though in the end, much like the family inside the sewers, they too perished. Next is Fort Independence, and this place is full of size anomalies. Huge oversized scissors, a large empty syringe, large forceps, and large scalpel. I'm not sure why the instruments have to be this big, but considering the facility is home to the outcasts, maybe the larger tools were needed during a mutant autopsy or something. Maybe they were studying the mutants in the hopes of learning how to kill them more efficiently, although that is just a theory. This next item is actually useful and can be found in the Falls Church/Mason District Metro, but will only appear if you're level 9. Inside the ticket booth among the feral ghouls is an oversized copy of
Duck and Cover!
which you can use for a permanent +1 explosives or +2 with the comprehension perk. Then, inside a place called Lucky's, which is an unmarked location near Tenpenny Tower, is a mannequin wearing the undersized Lucky Shades, granting the wearer +1 luck, and right by those is an undersized garden gnome. At Minefield, there's a couple of things for us to find. There's the model house inside the Gibson home, which is extremely tiny, one of the tiniest versions of an object in the entire game, and the Zane house holds an oversized teddy bear reading Pugilism Illustrated to a skeleton. Back in the city, inside the Museum of Technology, are 3 oversized stealth boys, 1 in the atrium and 2 more upstairs. At first I thought these were bigger for display purposes, but you can still use them as intended, which is really weird. Inside Raven Rock, the Enclave's main base in the capital Wasteland, are many items of unusual size. While they're not that interesting on their own, together they paint quite a funny picture. In the dining area on level 3 are 48 oversized and undersized butter knives, spoons, and forks. No idea why the Enclave soldiers can't hold on to their eating utensils, but either they need to go bigger or start putting down some floor mats or something. I know the Enclave say they resurfaced to control Project Purity and the clean drinking water, but after seeing this, I'm starting to believe they ran out of cutlery and resurfaced in search for more. Inside the Red Racer factory is a few tiny tricycles on a shelf, and hanging on the ceiling in the production room is an oversized teddy bear sitting on an oversized tricycle. Next is probably the best collection of items found inside SATCOM array NN03D. On a table upstairs is a complete chessboard with 4 undersized vodka bottles, 16 intact garden gnomes, 4 bottles of wine, 2 large empty whiskey bottles, and 2 bottles of whiskey, all serving as chess pieces. Also downstairs, behind the boarded up wall, is the largest teddy bear in the entire game. Getting the bear is a bit of a pain on console, but if you're on PC, use console commands to clip through and grab it. Just remember to shoot it first to prevent it from changing size before adding it to your collection. From best to worst, inside the Super Duper Mart is a grand total of 147 tin cans. Usually this wouldn't be worth talking about, but it is the largest collection of uniquely sized items in the capital Wasteland, and for that reason alone, it gets an honourable mention. Then, at the Jefferson Memorial, in the operating room downstairs, is an undersized stim pack. There's several of these in the game, but they're all the same size, and they don't give you any less health than the normal ones, which is a bit weird. At the Sniper Shack is an oversized teddy bear and an undersized shot glass, but the real reason we're here isn't for an item, but 2 creatures. Inside the shrunken cage is Fluffy and Jitters. The radroaches can't be taken with you, but you can befriend them with the Animal Friend perk. And the Sniper Shack can make for a decent home away from home, so you can technically have 2 pets if you so choose. Temple of the Union has another small tricycle, and inside Tenpenny Tower, Herbert Dashwood's suite features an oversized Brahmin skull and 2 small gnomes, while Alistair Tenpenny's suite contains the best item here, a pristine tiny Corvega sedan. Then at the VAPL-58 power station is a tiny safe with a very hard normal size lock. And inside the seal cistern near the WKML broadcast station is an undersized .32 pistol. Not great, but at least it's something you can actually use, and you can also find the explosives bobblehead here, which makes the journey worthwhile. Moving on to the DLCs, we begin with the abandoned apartments in the pit, where there's 3 small garden gnomes sitting atop the terminal. Then, in broken steel, inside the old Olney Underground, is another small gnome, this time having a bath, along with a small red ball and a teeny tiny boat. Further along in the old Olney S. Wilson building is a large teddy bear, drinking undersized whiskey and playing cards with a smoking garden gnome. And inside the mobile base crawler, in the restroom on the lower floor is a Deathclaw hand, which is oddly undersized, and in this case, invisible. That is until you pick it up and drop it again, though it is a buggy mess. On to Point Lookout, inside the Chinese intelligence bunker are 2 tiny Brahmin rib cages. There's no way Brahmin come in this size, so these are probably representing rats or something. By themselves, they're not worth checking out, but this is the location of the Backwater Rifle, one of the best weapons in the entire game and is my personal favourite. Moving on, in Plick's room at the Coastal Grotto, there's a small first aid box with normal sized items inside, and next to Plick himself is a small TV and small TV cables. Haley's Hardware has a large damaged gnome, and on the nearby dock is a normal teddy bear using a tiny fishing pole. At the People's Bank inside the bottom leftmost deposit box is an unusual scene, where one small garden gnome is holding an undersized plunger trying to unclog a small broken toilet, though he hasn't done a very good job. Next is the ritual site with the smaller than average picnic. Everything here is slightly smaller than normal, but the several punga fruits are the only things worth grabbing. Then, in Ruska's lair, there's Ruska, the pre-war circus bear, who's slightly oversized when compared to a normal Yaoguai, along with the biggest red ball in the entire game. And in the Sacred Bog, during the hallucination, all of the Schmaltek bobbleheads are oversized, with strength, endurance, intelligence, and agility being the largest, and perception being both the smallest and the only one upside down. The illusory objects are also bigger than normal, like the giant saw and the bottles of Nuka-Cola Quantum, which explode if you get too close. None of these can be collected though, not because they blow up, but because they're not real. And finally, if you have the Mothership Zeta DLC, then inside the weapons lab, hidden out of sight on the side of an alien chandelier, is a small Captain Cosmos poster and 2 undersized stasis chambers, which contain an oversized teddy bear and an undersized intact garden gnome. I guess the aliens also find the items of unusual size fascinating and have created tiny stasis chambers to contain them, which is pretty funny. And that's all of the oversized and undersized items that I thought were interesting enough to share. Most of them don't do anything special, but they do add a bit of charm to the Wasteland, and some of them tell their own stories if you stop and take a proper look. Whether it's the tiny model house in Minefield, the little chess sets, or the Enclave losing an entire dining room's worth of cutlery, they're all fun bits of flavour that make the world feel lived in. And if you fancy collecting them for yourself, just remember to shoot them first so they don't change size.